They told her the job was simple. Watch the kids, keep your head down, and never ask about the father's business. The pay was life-changing. The NDA was thicker than a phone book. But Clara didn't know that signing that paper was signing away her safety. She thought she was working for a businessman. She didn't know she was walking into the den of Davis Calvetti, the most dangerous man in Chicago. And she certainly didn't know that in 3 months she'd be bleeding out on a marble floor, taking a bullet meant for children that weren't even hers. This is the story of how an innocent nanny brought a Mafia king to his knees. The interview didn't take place in an office. It took place in the back of a blacked-out Cadillac Escalade, circling the loop in downtown Chicago. Clara Mitchell sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, trying to stop them from trembling. Across from her sat a man who wasn't the employer, but the lawyer. Mr. Sterling. He looked like a shark in a 3-piece suit, his eyes scanning her resume with a mixture of boredom and scrutiny. "Clean record," Sterling muttered, not looking up. "No living relatives within the state. A degree in early childhood education from Northwestern, but you dropped out of your master's program. Why?" "Financial reasons," Clara said, her voice steady despite the nerves. "My mother's medical bills. I needed to work immediately." Sterling finally looked up. "The salary we are offering is $10,000 a month, cash, plus room and board at the estate. You will have 0 expenses." Clara's breath hitched. 10,000? That could clear her debt in a year. It could pay for a specialist for her mother's condition. "What's the catch?" "The catch," Sterling said, sliding a thick document across the leather seat, "is privacy. Total, absolute silence. You do not have social media. You do not invite guests. You do not leave the property without an escort. And you never, under any circumstances, speak to the press or the police about Mr. Calvetti or his associates. If you breach this contract, you won't just be sued, Miss Mitchell. You will be erased." He didn't say it like a threat. He said it like a weather forecast. Clara looked at the document. The Calvetti estate. She had heard the name Calvetti before, whispered on the news in connection with sanitation unions and construction contracts, but usually accompanied by mugshots of men who looked much rougher than Mr. Sterling. "I have 2 charges," Sterling continued. "Toby and Bella, 5-year-old twins. They have gone through 4 nannies in 6 months. They are difficult. Their mother passed away 2 years ago. Their father is a busy man who requires peace." Clara thought of the eviction notice sitting on her kitchen counter. She thought of the empty fridge. She picked up the heavy fountain pen. "Where do I sign?" The Calvetti estate was a fortress. Located in Barrington Hills, it was surrounded by 12-foot iron fences and dense forest. When the gate opened, Clara saw men patrolling the grounds. They wore suits, but the bulges under their jackets were unmistakable. Security. Heavy security. She was shown to her room, a suite larger than her entire apartment, by the housekeeper, a stern woman named Mrs. Higgins, who looked at Clara with pity. "Keep to the east wing," Mrs. Higgins instructed. "The west wing is Mr. Calvetti's office and private quarters. He works late. He does not like noise. And he does not like strangers." "When will I meet him?" Clara asked, unpacking her meager belongings. "If you are lucky," Mrs. Higgins said darkly. "Never." Clara met the twins an hour later in the playroom. It was a chaotic mess of expensive toys, smashed Lego sets, and overturned furniture. Toby was sitting on top of a bookshelf, screaming, while Bella was systematically using a pair of scissors to cut the heads off a row of limited-edition Barbie dolls. "Get out!" Toby screamed when he saw Clara. "Daddy said no more nannies. We want Daddy." "Daddy is working," Clara said softly, stepping over a decapitated doll. She didn't scold them. She didn't raise her voice. She saw the rage in their eyes, but beneath it, she saw the terrified abandonment. "And I'm not here to be a nanny. I'm here because I heard someone in this room knows how to build a Lego Death Star, and I've never been able to figure it out." Toby stopped screaming. He looked at the Lego box in Clara's hands. It took 3 hours, but by dinner time the room was clean, the Death Star was half built, and for the first time in months, the house was quiet. That night, unable to sleep, Clara went down to the kitchen for a glass of water. It was 2 a.m. The house was silent as a tomb. As she turned the corner toward the kitchen, she froze. The back door was open. A group of men were walking in, supporting a figure in the center. The smell of copper, sharp and metallic, hit her nose instantly. Blood. "Get the doctor," a low, gravelly voice commanded. The voice was like thunder wrapped in velvet. Clara gasped, stepping back into the shadows, but her slipper squeaked against the marble. Every head turned. 4 guns were instantly drawn, pointed directly at her chest. The man in the center pushed his men aside. He was tall, well over 6'3", with hair black as pitch and eyes that burned with a cold, terrifying blue fire. He was wearing a white dress shirt that was soaked entirely red on the left side. This was Davis Calvetti, and he had just been shot. "Don't shoot," Davis growled, though his hand was pressed tight against his bleeding side. "It's the girl. The new hire." The men lowered their weapons, but they didn't holster them. A man with a scar running through his eyebrow, Adrian, Clara would learn later, stepped forward. "She saw us, Dom. She saw the blood." Davis limped forward, the pain evident in the tight set of his jaw. He loomed over Clara, who was pressed against the wall, her heart hammering so hard she thought it would crack her ribs. He smelled of expensive cologne, gunpowder, and iron. "You're Clara," he said. It wasn't a question. I just wanted water," she whispered. Davis leaned in, his face inches from hers. He was devastatingly handsome, in a brutal, jagged way. But his eyes were empty of mercy. "You didn't see anything tonight. You didn't see blood. You didn't see guns. You saw me coming home from a late business dinner where I spilled wine on my shirt. Do you understand?" "Yes," she managed to squeak. "Good. Because if you speak of this, the contract you signed will be the least of your problems." He turned to Adrian. "Get her out of here, and get the doctor." For the next 2 weeks, Clara lived on a knife's edge. She realized quickly that Davis Calvetti wasn't just a businessman. He was the Don of the Chicago outfit. The men guarding the house weren't security. They were soldiers. She tried to focus on the children. Toby and Bella were starving for affection. Davis was a ghost to them, a terrifying figure who appeared only to give orders or check security protocols. One Tuesday afternoon, Clara was in the garden with the twins. They were playing hide-and-seek in the hedge maze. It was a rare moment of sunshine and laughter. Suddenly, a black SUV screeched to a halt at the main gate. The guards at the perimeter tensed, rifles raised. Clara's instinct kicked in. She didn't wait to see who it was. "Game over!" she shouted, her voice changing from playful to commanding. "Toby, Bella, inside! Now, run!" The kids, sensing her fear, sprinted toward the back door. Clara ran behind them, her arms spread wide, as if she could shield them with her slender frame. She ushered them into the mudroom and locked the door just as Davis stormed out of his office, a pistol in his hand. He looked out the window, saw the SUV turn around and speed off, and then turned his fury on Clara. "Who told you to bring them inside?" he roared. "I saw a car," Clara said, breathless, checking the kids for injuries. "It was moving too fast. It didn't look right." Davis stared at her. He lowered the gun. The SUV had been a probe, a rival family testing the response time of his guards. Most civilians would have frozen or stared. Clara had identified a threat and secured the targets, his children, in under 10 seconds. "You have good instincts," Davis said, his voice losing its edge. "I grew up in a bad neighborhood, Mr. Calvetti," Clara said, smoothing Bella's hair. I know what a drive-by looks like before it happens." For the first time, Davis looked at her not as a liability, but as a person. He looked at how Bella was clinging to Clara's leg, burying her face in Clara's jeans. Bella never touched anyone. "Dinner," Davis said abruptly. "Tonight. You'll eat with us. The children need to see their father, apparently." Dinner was an awkward affair. The dining table was long enough to seat 20, but only 4 of them sat at one end. Davis ate in silence, his phone buzzing constantly next to his plate. "Daddy," Toby said, holding up a drawing. "Clara helped me draw a tiger." Davis glanced at the paper. "It's good. Eat your vegetables." "It's a Siberian tiger," Toby pressed, desperate for attention. "Clara says they are the strongest." "Clara knows a lot about tigers?" Davis asked, his eyes flicking to her. "I read a lot," Clara said, cutting Bella's steak. "Mr. Calvetti, Toby has a recital at his school on Friday. He's playing the triangle. It's a small part, but he's practiced for weeks." Davis sighed, rubbing his temples. "I have meetings on Friday. Adrian will take them." "He doesn't want Adrian," Clara said, her voice dropping, risking everything. "He wants you." The air in the room froze. The guard standing by the door shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke to Davis Calvetti like that. Davis slowly put down his fork. He looked at Clara. "Do you know who I am, Miss Mitchell? Do you know what I do to keep this food on this table?" "I know you are a father," Clara shot back, her hands shaking under the table but her eyes locked on his. "And right now, that is the only job title that matters in this room." Davis stared at her for a long, agonizing minute. The twins held their breath. "Friday," Davis said, picking up his wine glass. 2:00 p.m., put it on my calendar." Toby's face lit up like a Christmas tree. Clara let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Later that night, Adrian cornered Clara in the hallway. Adrian was Davis's second-in-command. He was charming, handsome in a slick way, but something about him made Clara's skin crawl. "You're playing a dangerous game, Angel," Adrian whispered, blocking her path. "Dom isn't a puppy you can train. You push him too far, he bites." "I'm just doing my job, Adrian," Clara said, trying to step around him. "Are you?" Adrian smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Because it looks like you're playing house. Just remember, empires fall from the inside. Don't get too comfortable." Clara didn't know it then, but Adrian wasn't warning her. He was threatening her. Because Adrian had just made a deal with the Volkov family, the Russians who wanted Davis's territory, and the only thing standing in the way of Adrian's coup was Davis's focus. If Davis became a family man, Adrian couldn't manipulate him. Clara was becoming a problem. And in Adrian's world, problems were eliminated. Friday arrived with a sky the color of bruised iron. A storm was brewing over Lake Michigan, but the atmosphere inside the Calvetti estate was even heavier. Davis Calvetti adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror. He was used to wearing $5,000 suits, but today the silk felt like a noose. He wasn't going to a sit-down with the cartel or a negotiation with the union bosses. He was going to a kindergarten recital. "You look nice," Clara's voice floated down the stairs. Davis turned, his breath hitched in his throat, just for a second. Clara wasn't wearing her usual jeans and oversized sweater. She was wearing a simple navy blue dress that hugged her waist and flared at the knees. Her hair was pulled back, revealing the soft curve of her neck. She looked elegant. She looked like she belonged there. "It's for the school," she said quickly, mistaking his stare for disapproval. "They have a dress code for guests." "It's fine," Davis grunted, turning away to hide the flicker of something dangerous waking up in his chest. "Let's get this over with." The drive to the private school in Lincoln Park was executed with military precision. 3 SUVs. Davis and the family in the middle vehicle, bulletproof glass tinted so dark it was midnight inside. Toby was vibrating with anxiety, clutching his triangle. Bella was holding Clara's hand so tight her knuckles were white. "What if I mess up?" Toby whispered. Davis looked at his son. He didn't know what to say. In his world, if you messed up, you died. That wasn't exactly encouraging advice for a 5-year-old. Clara squeezed Toby's shoulder. "You won't. But even if you miss a beat, just keep playing. No one knows the music but you. Make it your own." Davis looked at Clara. Make it your own. It was simple advice, but it worked. Toby nodded, his shoulders relaxing. The recital was an hour of screeching violins and off-key singing. To any other parent, it was adorable. To Davis, it was torture, until Toby walked on stage. The boy looked terrified. He scanned the audience, his eyes wide. When he locked eyes with Davis in the 3rd row, he froze. Davis sat up straighter. He didn't smile. He didn't know how to smile on command, but he nodded, a sharp, firm nod. "I see you. I am here." Toby beamed. He hit the triangle with perfect timing. Ding. For a moment, just a moment, Davis Calvetti wasn't the Mafia king of Chicago. He was just a dad watching his kid, and he realized with a sudden pang of guilt that he owed this feeling to the woman sitting next to him. He glanced at Clara. She was beaming, tears shining in her eyes as she applauded. She loved these kids. It wasn't just a paycheck. It was real. As the curtain fell, Davis leaned close to her ear. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice low and vibrating against her skin. Clara turned, startled by the proximity. Their faces were inches apart. The electric tension between them was sudden and undeniable. "Mr. Calvetti, Davis," he corrected. "When we aren't at the house, call me Davis." Before Clara could answer, Adrian appeared at the end of the aisle. He wasn't clapping. He was holding his earpiece, his face pale. He signaled to Davis. "We have a problem." Davis's demeanor shifted instantly. The father vanished. The dawn returned. The warmth left his eyes, replaced by glacial ice. "We're leaving," Davis whispered to Clara. "Now. Get the kids. Don't run, but walk fast." "What is it?" Clara asked, sensing the shift. "We've been compromised." The parking lot was chaos. Parents were milling about, hugging their children, taking photos. It was the worst possible environment for a security extraction. Too many civilians. Too many blind spots. "Into the car. Now," Davis ordered, opening the rear door of the middle SUV. Clara ushered Toby and Bella inside. "Get in. Buckle up. Heads down," she instructed calmly, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Davis was scanning the perimeter. He saw a grey van parked 2 rows over. The windows were down. A glint of metal flashed in the afternoon sun. "Get down," Davis roared. The air shattered. Rat-tat-tat-tat-tat. Automatic gunfire erupted across the parking lot. Glass exploded. Parents screamed. The windshield of the lead SUV shattered. "Ambush!" Adrian screamed, returning fire from behind a parked sedan. Davis didn't dive for cover. He drew his weapon, a custom .45, and stood his ground, firing methodically at the van. He was a statue of violence, drawing the fire away from his children. But there were 2 teams. While Davis engaged the van, a motorcycle roared out from between 2 school buses behind them. The rider leveled a submachine gun directly at the open rear door of the SUV, where the children were screaming. Clara saw him. Davis was too far away. The guards were pinned down. Time seemed to slow down into a thick, honey-like sludge. Clara looked at Toby and Bella, huddled together on the leather seat. She looked at the black barrel of the gun. She looked at Davis, who was turning too slowly, horror dawning on his face. She didn't think. She didn't calculate the contract or the salary. She just moved. Clara threw herself across the back seat, covering both children with her body, shielding them like a human blanket. Bang! 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 3 shots rang out, louder than the rest. Clara felt a sledgehammer hit her back. The force slammed her against the leather seat. The pain wasn't immediate. It was just a sudden, cold shock, followed by a burning fire that spread through her chest. "Clara!" Toby screamed. Davis turned just in time to see the motorcycle speed off. He saw Clara slumped over his children. He saw the crimson stain rapidly expanding across the back of her navy blue dress. A roar ripped from Davis's throat, a sound so primal and terrifying that even his own men flinched. He sprinted to the car, ripping the door open. "Daddy! She's not waking up!" Bella was sobbing, her hands covered in red. Davis pulled Clara out of the car, laying her gently on the asphalt. Her face was pale, her lips turning blue. She looked up at him, her eyes losing focus. The kids!" She wheezed, blood bubbling past her lips. "They're safe," Davis choked out, pressing his hands against the wound in her shoulder and back to staunch the flow. "You saved them, Clara. You saved them." "Good," she whispered. Her eyes rolled back, her head lolled to the side. "Stay with me," Davis shouted, shaking her. "Adrian, get the car. Forget the convoy. We're going to the hospital. Now." He scooped her up in his arms. She felt impossibly light. For a man who had dealt death his entire life, the weight of her life in his hands felt unbearable. As the SUV peeled out of the lot, tires screeching, Davis Calvetti looked down at the woman bleeding out on his lap. He realized, with a terrified clarity, that if she died, the last part of his soul would die with her. The private clinic was hidden in an old warehouse district near the docks. It was off the grid, staffed by surgeons who had lost their licenses, or were paid enough not to ask where the bullet holes came from. Davis paced the sterile white hallway like a caged tiger. He was still wearing his suit, now ruined, the white shirt stained rust-red with Clara's blood. He hadn't washed his hands. He wanted to feel the reminder. Adrian stood by the door, looking nervous. "Dom, you need to change. The men are arriving. You can't let them see you like this." "I don't care what they see," Davis snarled. He stopped pacing and got right in Adrian's face. "How did they know? The recital wasn't on the public calendar. Only 3 people knew the schedule. Me, you, and Clara." Adrian swallowed hard. "Dom, look. She's the new girl. We don't know her background, really. Maybe she tipped them off? A martyrdom play to get your trust?" Davis grabbed Adrian by the throat and slammed him against the wall. The guards looked away. "She took a bullet for my children," Davis hissed, his voice low and lethal. "If she wanted them dead, she just had to step aside. If you ever insinuate she is a traitor again, I will cut out your tongue." He dropped Adrian. Adrian gasped for air, massaging his throat. "I'm just saying, we need to investigate everyone. It was the Volkoffs. The motorcycle had their insignia." "I know it was the Volkoffs," Davis said, staring at the operating room doors, "and I will rain hellfire on them. But right now, I need her to live." The doors swung open. An elderly doctor in green scrubs stepped out, pulling off his mask. Davis was on him in a second. "Well?" "She's stable," the doctor said, wiping sweat from his brow. "The bullet missed her spine by 2 millimeters, punctured her lung, and broke her scapula. She's lost a lot of blood, but she's young and strong. She'll make it." Davis let out a breath that felt like it had been held for 10 years. He leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. "Can I see her?" "She's sedated, but yes." Davis entered the room quietly. The beep of the heart monitor was the only sound. Clara lay in the center of the bed, looking small and fragile against the white sheets. An IV line ran into her arm. Her shoulder was heavily bandaged. He pulled a chair up to the bedside and sat down. He took her hand, the hand that had built Lego sets, brushed Bella's hair, and held his gaze at the dinner table. It was cold. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the unconscious woman. I promised you safety. I failed." He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "Daddy?" Davis turned. Toby and Bella were standing in the doorway, holding Mrs. Higgins's hands. They looked traumatized, their eyes red from crying. "Is Clara dead?" Bella asked, her voice trembling. "No, Piccola," Davis said, waving them over. "Clara is sleeping. She's going to be okay." The twins rushed to the bed. They didn't climb on it. They just stood there, staring at her with reverence. "She jumped on us," Toby said softly. "The bad man had a gun, and she jumped on us." "I know," Davis said. He looked at his children, then at Clara. He realized then that the contract was void. She wasn't an employee. She wasn't a nanny. "She's an angel," Bella whispered, touching Clara's cheek. "Mummy sent her." The words hit Davis like a physical blow. His late wife. He had been so angry since she died, so shut off. He thought he could never let another woman into this dangerous, violent life, but Clara was already in it. She had bled for it. He stood up, his resolve hardening into diamond. He gently guided the children out of the room, handing them back to Mrs. Higgins. "Take them home. Lock the estate down. No one in, no one out." "Where are you going, sir?" Mrs. Higgins asked. Davis walked back to the room, looked at Clara one last time, and then turned toward the exit. His eyes were no longer blue fire. They were black voids of vengeance. "I'm going to kill everyone who had a part in this," Davis said calmly. "And then I'm going to find the rat in my organization who sold us out." As he walked down the hallway, Adrian watched him go. Adrian's hand went into his pocket, his fingers brushing against his burner phone. He needed to make a call. The hit had failed. Davis was alive. The girl was alive. And the devil was coming for them all. Chicago burned that night. Not literally, but the underworld felt the heat. Davis Calvetti did not go home to change. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He went to the Volkov Grand Operations Center, a shipping yard on the south side. He didn't take an army. He took 4 of his best men, including a terrifying enforcer named Luca, who never spoke. They kicked down the doors of the main office. The Russians were counting money, stacks of cash wrapped in rubber bands. They scrambled for their weapons, but they were too slow. Davis moved through the room like a grim reaper. 2 shots, 2 bodies. He didn't seek cover. He walked forward with the terrifying inevitability of a natural disaster. He cornered the Volkov underboss, a man named Yuri, in the back office. Yuri was frantically trying to climb out a window. Davis grabbed him by the belt and threw him across the room. Yuri crashed into a glass display case, shattering it. "Who gave you the schedule?" Davis asked. His voice wasn't a shout. It was a whisper, which made it infinitely scarier. "I don't know," Yuri screamed, blood pouring from his nose. "We just got a text, an anonymous tip, said the Calvetti boy would be at the school." Davis pressed the barrel of his gun to Yuri's knee. "I don't believe in anonymity." Bang! Yuri shrieked. "The phone! Check the phone!" He pointed to a burner on the desk. Davis picked it up. He scrolled through the messages. "Target at Lincoln Park. 2:02 p.m. Minimal security. The girl is the weak link. Take them all out." Davis stared at the screen. The number was blocked, but the syntax, the phrasing. "The girl is the weak link." Only one person had called Clara a liability. Only one person had consistently tried to push her out. Davis's blood ran cold. It wasn't just a rival. It was a brother. He turned to Luca. "Finish it here. Burn the cash. Leave the bodies as a message." "Where are you going, boss?" Luca grunted. "To the hospital," Davis said, checking his watch. "Because if the rat knows the hit failed, he's going to try to finish the job himself." Back at the clinic, Clara drifted in and out of consciousness. The pain was a dull throb, masked by heavy morphine. Every time she opened her eyes, she expected to see the ceiling of her cramped apartment. Instead, she saw white tiles and expensive equipment. She tried to move, but a groan escaped her lips. "Easy," a voice rumbled. Clara turned her head. Davis was there. But he looked different. The suit jacket was gone. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing muscular forearms covered in tattoos she had never seen before. He looked exhausted, covered in soot and grime, but his eyes were glued to her face. "The kids?" she rasped. Her throat felt like sandpaper. "They are home. Guards are at every door. They made you a card. It's mostly glitter," Davis said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. He reached out and brushed a stray hair from her forehead. His touch was incredibly gentle for a man who had just dismantled a crime syndicate. "You stayed?" Clara asked. "I had some errands," Davis said darkly. "But I came back. I will always come back." He took her hand. "Why did you do it, Clara? You signed a contract for money, not for bullets." "They're just kids, Davis," she whispered, her eyes fluttering. "And they're your kids." Davis fell silent. In his world, loyalty was bought, love was a transaction. But this woman, she had offered her life for free. "I need you to listen to me," Davis said, his voice urgent. "I have to leave the room for 10 minutes. I have to set a trap. You are going to be safe, I promise. But someone is coming in here. Someone we know." "Who?" "Adrian." Clara's eyes widened. "Adrian?" "Just pretend to be asleep," Davis said, squeezing her hand. "Trust me." He kissed her forehead, lingering for a second too long, and then slipped into the attached bathroom, leaving the door cracked open just an inch. The silence in the private recovery suite of St. Jude's, a medical facility on the outskirts of Chicago that existed solely for men like Davis Calvetti, was heavy enough to crush a man's lungs. Davis sat in a leather armchair in the corner of the room, shrouded in shadow. The only light came from the rhythmic, green pulse of the heart monitor, and the pale orange glow of the streetlights filtering through the blinds. He hadn't moved for 4 hours. He hadn't changed his clothes. The white dress shirt he had worn to the recital was stiff with dried blood. Clara's blood. He refused to wash it off. He needed the smell, that sharp, metallic scent of copper and terror, to keep his rage focused. He looked at the woman in the bed. Clara looked impossibly small amongst the tangle of wires and tubes. The doctors had said she was lucky. The bullet had shattered her scapula and collapsed her left lung, but it had missed the major arteries. She was sedated now, floating in a morphine haze, her chest rising and falling with a shallow, fragile rhythm that Davis found himself sinking his own breathing to. If she stops, he thought, I stop. A soft knock came at the door. It was Luca, his head of security, a man built like a vending machine and just as talkative. Luca stepped in, closing the door softly behind him. "It's done," Luca whispered, his voice grave. "The Volkovs are gutted. We hit the shipping yard, the warehouse in Gary, and the safe house on Wacker Drive. There's no one left to give orders." Davis didn't look away from Clara. "And the leak?" Luca hesitated. He shifted his weight, the floorboards creaking under his bulk. "We found a burner phone on Yuri's body. The last call was to a number we recognized, boss." Davis finally turned his head. His eyes were red-rimmed, burning with a cold, blue fire. "Say it." "It was Adrian." Davis closed his eyes. He didn't scream. He didn't flip the table. He felt a sickening sense of inevitability. Adrian wasn't just his underboss. He was his cousin. They had grown up in the same neighborhood, fought in the same schoolyards, and risen through the ranks together. Adrian had been the one to drive Davis to the hospital when his wife died. Adrian was the godfather to Toby. "He thinks I'm still at the warehouse," Davis said, his voice a low rumble. "He thinks Clara is the loose end. He told me earlier that she was a liability. He said if she died, I'd get my focus back." "He's on his way here," Luca said. He called the front desk. Checked if visitors were allowed. He's coming to finish it. Davis stood up. The movement was stiff, his joints locking from hours of stillness. He walked over to the bedside table and picked up his heavy, custom-made 1911 pistol. He checked the chamber. A round was loaded. He clicked the safety on and placed it on the table, right next to a vase of wilting lilies. "Clear the floor," Davis ordered. "Remove the guards from the door. Turn off the security cameras in this hallway. I want this place to look abandoned." "Boss," Luca warned. "If he comes in armed, he won't come in shooting," Davis corrected. "Adrian is a coward. He likes things clean. He'll want to make it look like a medical complication, a failed heart, a clot." Davis looked down at Clara, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead with a trembling finger. "Go, wait in the stairwell. Do not come in until I call you." Luca nodded once and vanished. Davis looked at the bathroom door. It was a small ensuite, dark and cramped. He stepped inside, leaving the door cracked open just an inch, enough to see the bed, enough to see the IV drip, enough to see the devil when he walked in. Then he waited. 20 minutes later, the elevator dinged down the hall. The sound was faint, but in the silence of the ward, it sounded like a gunshot. Footsteps followed. Soft, purposeful strides on the linoleum floor. They weren't the heavy boots of a soldier. They were the expensive Italian loafers of a man who thought he owned the world. The door handle to room 402 turned slowly. Davis held his breath in the darkness of the bathroom. Through the crack, he watched the sliver of light from the hallway widen as the door opened. Adrian stepped inside. He looked immaculate. He was wearing a charcoal grey suit, his hair perfectly coiffed. He held a bouquet of flowers in one hand, a grotesque prop for the murder he was about to commit. He closed the door gently, engaging the lock with a soft click. Adrian stood at the foot of the bed for a long moment, just watching Clara. He tossed the flowers onto the visitor chair with a careless flick of his wrist. "You really are a pretty thing," Adrian whispered to the unconscious woman. His voice was smooth, lacking any tremor of guilt. "It's a shame, really. I liked you. But you just had to play hero." He walked to the side of the bed. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small glass vial and a syringe. He held it up to the light, tapping the side to remove air bubbles. "Potassium chloride," Adrian murmured, as if explaining a recipe. "Stops the heart instantly. No pain. They'll call it cardiac arrest from the trauma. Davis will cry, we'll bury you, and then we get back to business." Adrian sighed, a sound of genuine frustration. "You see, Clara, you broke him. He's weak when you're around. He's talking about recitals and dinners. Men like us, we don't get dinners. We get power. And I can't let him throw away the empire for a babysitter." He reached for the IV port on Clara's arm. "He didn't throw it away," a voice said from the darkness. "He grew up." Adrian froze. The syringe hovered inches from the plastic tube. Davis kicked the bathroom door open. It slammed against the wall with a deafening bang. Adrian spun around, dropping the syringe. It clattered to the floor, rolling under the bed. His face went pale, his eyes darting to the door, then to Davis. "Dom!" Adrian stammered, his hands flying up in a surrender gesture. "Dom, Jesus! You scared me. I was bringing flowers." "Cut the act," Davis said. He didn't yell. He walked forward slowly, step by step, forcing Adrian to back up until he hit the window ledge. "I heard you, Adrian. I heard every word." Adrian's mask crumbled. The panic in his eyes was replaced by a desperate, cornered malice. "You weren't supposed to be here. You were supposed to be killing Russians." "I did," Davis said calmly. "I killed them all. Yuri told me about the text message before he died. He told me about the inside man who wanted the throne." "I did it for us," Adrian shouted, his voice cracking. "For the family. You've gone soft, Davis. Look at you. You're sitting in a hospital crying over the help while the Volkovs are encroaching on our territory. I made a deal to save the Calvetti name. You ordered a hit on a car containing my children, Davis roared. The sudden volume made Adrian flinch. You didn't care if Toby or Bella took a bullet, did you? As long as Clara died. Collateral damage? Adrian spat. The kids weren't the target. But if they got hurt, well, tragedy builds character, doesn't it? It would have made you ruthless again. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Davis stared at his cousin, seeing him truly for the first time. He didn't see a partner. He saw a disease. Ruthless, Davis repeated softly. He lunged. It wasn't a fight. It was a dismantling. Davis grabbed Adrian by the lapels of his expensive suit and slammed him into the wall so hard the plaster cracked. Adrian tried to gouge Davis's eyes, but Davis caught his wrist and twisted it. A sickening snap echoed through the room. Adrian screamed, his knees buckling, but Davis held him up. "You want ruthless!" Davis hissed, his face inches from Adrian's. "Ruthless is what I'm going to do to you." He threw Adrian across the room. Adrian crashed into the medical cart, sending trays and instruments clattering everywhere. He scrambled on the floor, trying to reach for the gun Davis had left on the table. The bait. Adrian grabbed the 1911, spinning around on his knees, aiming at Davis. "Die, just die." He pulled the trigger. Click. Adrian pulled it again. Click, click. He looked at the gun in horror. "I took the firing pin out," Davis said, standing over him like a monolith of judgment. "You really think I'd leave a loaded weapon within your reach? I'm not sloppy, Adrian. You are." Davis kicked the gun out of Adrian's hand. He grabbed Adrian by the throat, lifting him off the ground, squeezing until Adrian's face turned purple, his feet kicking uselessly at the air. "Please," Adrian choked out. "Family." "Clara is family," Davis whispered. "You are nothing." Davis threw him to the floor. The door opened, and Luca stepped in, flanked by 2 other guards. They looked at the broken man on the floor with zero sympathy. "Get him out of here," Davis ordered, turning his back on his cousin. "Take him to the basement of the warehouse. I'll deal with him when she wakes up." "Dom! Davis!" Adrian screamed as he was dragged out. "You can't do this! I'm your blood!" The door slammed shut, cutting off his screams. Davis stood there, chest heaving, his hands shaking with adrenaline. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He walked back to the sink in the corner and washed his hands again, scrubbing until his skin was raw. When he turned back, he saw a pair of eyes watching him. Clara was awake. "How much did you hear?" Davis asked, his voice hoarse. Clara blinked slowly. She looked groggy, pain etched into the corners of her eyes, but her gaze was lucid. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Davis quickly poured a cup of water and held the straw to her lips. She drank greedily. "Enough," she whispered finally. "He wanted to inject me. He wanted to take you away from me," Davis said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "He failed." Clara looked at his hands. They were clean now, but she knew what they were capable of. She had seen the violence in his eyes just moments ago. It should have terrified her. She was a nanny from the suburbs. She built Lego castles and made peanut butter sandwiches. She shouldn't be in a room with a man who had just sentenced his cousin to death. But then she looked at his face. She saw the exhaustion. She saw the terror, not of Adrian, but of losing her. "The children?" she asked. "Safe," Davis promised. "They are at the estate. Mrs. Higgins is guarding them with a shotgun. I'm not joking." A weak smile tugged at Clara's lips. "She always did scare me." The room fell silent again. Davis picked up her hand, tracing the veins on the back of her wrist. "I have to ask you something," Davis said, his voice low. "And I need you to answer honestly. No contracts, no employee obligations." Clara squeezed his hand weakly. "Okay. Why did you do it?" Davis looked into her eyes, searching for the truth. You could have stayed down. You could have covered your head. Why did you cover them? I don't know, Clara admitted softly. I didn't think. I saw the gun, and I knew I couldn't let them get hurt. I love them, Davis. I know I'm just the nanny, but I love them. You're not just the nanny, Davis said fiercely. Not anymore. He leaned in closer. I'm going to give you a choice, Clara. When you heal, you can leave. I will give you $5 million. I will set you up in Italy, France, wherever you want. You will never have to work again. You will be safe. Far away from me, and far away from this life. Clara watched him. And the other option? You stay, Davis said. The words seemed hard for him to get out. You stay here, with me, with the kids. But if you stay, you need to know what you're signing up for. This life, it's war. There will be other Adrians. There will be other threats. I will protect you with my last breath, but I cannot promise peace. Clara looked at the ceiling, then back at Davis. She thought about her lonely apartment. She thought about the debt collectors. Then she thought about Toby's laugh. She thought about Bella's hugs. And she thought about this man, this dangerous, broken, beautiful man who looked at her as if she were the only light in a dark universe. $5 million is a lot of money, Clara mused. Davis's face fell slightly. He began to pull his hand away. I understand. I'll have the lawyers draft the... Clara tightened her grip on his hand. I'm not finished. She looked him dead in the eye. I don't want the money. I want the risk. Davis froze. Clara, I can't go back to a normal life, Davis, she whispered. Not after this. And I can't imagine waking up in a world where I don't see those kids every day. Or you. She reached up with her good arm and touched his cheek. His stubble was rough against her palm. I'm staying, she said. But we are renegotiating the contract. Davis let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He turned his face into her palm and kissed it. Name your terms. No more secrets, she said. If there's a threat, you tell me. If you're bleeding, you show me. We do this together. Or not at all. Davis nodded, his forehead resting against hers. Together. I swear it. 6 months later. The Calvetti estate had changed. The 12-foot iron fences were still there, and the guard still patrolled the perimeter, but the atmosphere inside the walls was transformed. The garden, once manicured and sterile, was now dotted with colourful toys. A swing set had been installed near the fountain. It was a crisp autumn's day. The trees were blazing with gold and crimson leaves. In the master bedroom, Clara stood before a full-length mirror. The dress was a masterpiece of lace and silk, fitted to perfection. The scar on her shoulder was hidden beneath the delicate fabric, a secret badge of honor she carried with pride. You look like a princess, Bella squealed from the bed, where she was jumping up and down in her flower girl dress. No, Toby corrected, adjusting his bow tie in the mirror with serious concentration. She looks like a queen. Daddy said so. Clara smiled at them through the reflection. You two better not wrinkle those outfits before the photos. We won't, they chorused. There was a knock at the door. Mrs. Higgins poked her head in, her usual stern expression softened by a genuine smile. It's time, dear. The guests are seated. Is he nervous? Clara asked. Mrs. Higgins chuckled. He's been pacing the altar for 20 minutes. I think he's terrified you're going to climb out the window. Clara turned, picking up her bouquet of white roses. He should know by now. I don't run. The ceremony was held in the back garden, overlooking the lake. It wasn't a massive affair with politicians and judges. It was intimate. The men standing guard were the ones who had bled with Davis. The guests were the few people in Chicago who could be trusted. As Clara stepped onto the aisle, the The string quartet began to play. The crowd stood. Davis was waiting under an arch of white orchids. When he saw her, his composure broke. This man, who had stared down barrels of guns and ordered the deaths of enemies without blinking, had tears in his eyes. He looked different than the man she had met in the interview. The darkness was still there. It would always be part of him. But it was no longer consuming him. It was a shield now, not a cage. Clara reached the altar. Davis took her hands. His grip was warm and solid. "You came," he whispered, as if he still couldn't believe it. "I told you." Clara smiled, her thumb brushing his knuckles. "I had to make sure you were following the new contract terms." The priest began the service, speaking of love, sacrifice, and loyalty. But neither Davis nor Clara needed the sermon. They had already lived the vows. They had sworn them in a parking lot under fire, in a hospital room covered in blood, and in the quiet moments of healing that followed. "Do you, Davis," the priest asked, "take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, until death do you part?" Davis looked at Clara. He thought of the bullet she took. He thought of the night in the hospital. He thought of Adrian and the Volkovs and the peace he had finally secured for his family. "I do," Davis said, "and I will, every day. And do you, Clara?" Clara looked at the twins, who were watching with wide, happy eyes from the front row. She looked at Davis, her partner, her protector, her love. "I do," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Then by the power vested in me," the priest smiled, "I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Davis didn't hesitate. He pulled her close, dipping her slightly, and kissed her with a passion that made the guards whistle, and Mrs. Higgins blush. As they broke the kiss, breathless and laughing, Davis rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Mrs. Calvetti," he murmured. "I love you too, boss," she whispered back. They turned to face the crowd, hands clasped tight. As they walked back down the aisle, petals raining down on them, Clara knew that the story wasn't over. There would be challenges, there would be enemies. But as she looked at the man beside her and the children running ahead of them, she knew one thing for certain. They were untouchable. From a terrified nanny to the queen of the Chicago underworld, Clara didn't just survive the Calvetti family. She saved it. She proved that sometimes the strongest armor isn't a bulletproof vest, but the courage to love what others fear. Davis thought he hired an employee, but he found the one person willing to bleed for his heart. What did you think of Davis's revenge? Did Adrian get what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of danger, betrayal, and romance, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We have a dark romance involving a runaway princess and a cartel leader coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching.